Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ammar Ahmad Qureshi and my group member is Mudassir Ahmad. The topic of my assignment number 1 is supply chain attacks and its preventions. This is the flow of presentation. Supply chain attack. Supply chain attack targets software developers and suppliers, legitimate apps. Supply chain attack is an emerging kind of a threat that targets software developers and suppliers. The goal is to assess source code, build processes, or update mechanisms by infecting legitimate apps to distribute malware. Attackers hunt unsecure network protocols, unprotected servers infrastructure, and unsafe coding practices. They break in, changes source code, and hide malware in build and update processes. In supply chain, open source is clearly a vulnerability. Working. This is the block diagram of a working of a supply chain attack. As shown in the figure, supply chain attack to work, hacker have to insert malicious code into the software or find ways to compromise network protocols and components. These are the types of supply chain attacks: compromise software, building tools, and update infrastructure. Introduce security weaknesses in the development processes even before the process is used to create an application. Stolen code sign certificate or sign malicious apps using the identity of a developing developer company. Hackers steal a certificate used to vouch for the legitimacy and a safety of a company's product. They can peddle malicious code under the guises of that company's certificate. Compromise practice specialized codes shipped into hardware or firmware component. Hackers can introduce malicious code in a firmware to gain access to a system's network. Pre-installed malware on devices such as cameras, USBs, phones, etc. Hackers put malware on phones, universal serial bus drives, cameras, and other mobile devices, and when the target connect to it, the system or a network malicious code gets introduced. Statistics. According to the survey, among 64% of the organizations, 70% lack proper policies, and the supply chain open source is clearly a vulnerability. Software supply chain attacks grew by more than 300% in 2021 in comparison to 2020. Sources. These are the sources of a supply chain attacks: commercial software products, open source supply chain, foreign source threats. Commercial software products. For example, if a supply chain attacker can penetrate a software company system or compromise the integrity of the product, they can gain access to the target number of targets. Open source supply chain. With open source software solution, anyone can contribute to the development of a program. Using the free space access, hackers have programmed vulnerabilities into open source solution, making it easy to make them introduce threats to companies that use the software product produced. Foreign source threats. In countries like China, where the government can experience deep control over that private companies produces, software products may contain malicious code that the government demanded the producer to include to enter other countries' system. Recent attacks. A recent Chinese hack is a wake up call for the security of the whole software supply chain 2022. Chinese Chinese messaging app. According to the recent reports, a Chinese backed hacking group inserted a malicious code into a messaging app, essentially pulling off the equivalent of infamous SolarWind hack. Users of Mimi were served a version of an app with malicious code added, thanks to the attacker taking control of the servers that delivered the app. In short, this was a software chain attack in which software developer delivery pipeline was compromised, and no one knew for a month. Dependency confusion in 2021. A security researchers were able to breach Microsoft, Uber, Apple, and Tesla. Mimikatz 2021. In the Mimikatz attack, hackers were able to compromise a security certificate that authenticate Mimikatz services on Microsoft 365 Exchange web services. Countermeasures. Strong code integrity policies. Use endpoint detection and response. Deploy strong code integrity policies to allow only authorized apps to run. Use endpoint detections and response solutions that can automatically detect and remediate suspicious activities. These are the references of our presentation. This is all. Thank you.